And Democratic Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. He sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for joining me. I haven't had a chance to talk to you about what you thought of the airstrikes in the first place, so I'm going to ask you two questions at the same time. What do you think of the airstrikes in the first place, and what's your reaction to the Russian foreign minister calling the airstrikes an act of aggression?
Well, I think the airstrikes were ordered by the president, obviously without consultation or authorization from the Congress. They were, I think, intended to send a message, which seems to have been achieved. I think the real issue is that the president has the responsibility to actually have a plan, a strategy, a mission for the U.S. response to Syria, and to figure out the role the United States will play in helping to end this conflict. And what's sort of disturbing is this notion of, an airstrike is not a substitute for a policy. It's a sort of one-off. And so what I think we really need to hear from the president is what is the, you have his own administration that seems to have conflicting views. Secretary Tillerson saying it's up to the Syrian people to decide whether Assad remains. You have Ambassador Haley saying there is no way that Assad can remain in the future of Syria. And so, there needs to be not only consistency, but a well-thought-out plan for the U.S. response to Syria. And I think what we saw was a one-off strike that I think responded to what people saw on television, the horrible incidents of the use of chemical weapons, which were, of course, the awful and despicable acts. But what we really need is a thoughtful, articulated plan. And if that plan includes the use of military force, the president needs to come to Congress, seek an authorization, and receive that. So I think there's a lot of questions. What's next? I don't think anyone knows. I don't think the president has articulated with any clarity what the plan is. And so it was sort of a one-off strike, and now we see our adversaries in the region joining together to condemn it, which is, of course, no surprise.
Let me ask you this. A one-off strike against Syria, which is sort of toothless than what it can do to its own people and what the Russians can do to help them, is very different from what we're talking about this weekend, which might be a preemptive non-nuclear strike against a North Korean missile test, which would also not be something that the president has gone to Congress with a plan for or an authorization for the use of military force. How concerned are you about that?
Yeah, no, they're quite different. As you pointed out, the Syrian strike apparently didn't even do much damage to the airport facility, the runways, and they're already back using parts of the facility. So, but the North Korean situation is very different. This is a nuclear power that has by best estimates, between 6 and 16 nuclear bombs, and are attempting to develop a capacity to deliver those by intercontinental ballistic missile systems. This is very serious. This is a very unstable leader who has not responded so far to a number of different efforts. And a preemptive strike, if it were to happen, is likely to ignite a very serious conflict, a war, and maybe even a nuclear war. It would expose American troops on the peninsula to tremendous danger. We have about 55,000 troops on the peninsula. The president has sent out an aircraft carrier and destroyers to the waters around the peninsula as a show of force. This is one where I think the appropriate course is really to reduce the rhetoric and try to de-escalate this and continue to use all the levers of diplomatic, economic power to try to achieve the right results here. And obviously, a preemptive strike has tremendously serious consequences. It may well ignite a very significant war and expose not only the peninsula, but many Americans to grave danger. So this is very serious. I think what we have to be sure is that the president understands the implications of this kind of military action. What I fear is you sort of got a political bump from the strike, the mother of all bombs strike in Afghanistan, and we don't want the president to be making decisions where he just sort of thinks more bombs are the way to build up his popularity, but rather they're making decisions based on the national security interests of the United States and the long-term safety and security of the